I travel a lot for work, covering Formula One and IndyCar races, and I'm always jumping onto different Wi-Fi networks, and I like to make sure that my information is staying secure. So that's why I use a VPN. First and foremost, security is of utmost importance, especially when connecting to unfamiliar networks. So private internet access ensures that your online activities remain secure, even when you're on the move. By encrypting your internet connection, it prevents anyone from intercepting your data or eavesdropping on your online communications. This means you can browse with confidence and peace of mind. So if you want to enjoy all the benefits of private internet access, now's the time to subscribe. Head to piavpn.com/nailingtheapex and get an 83% discount. Seriously, 83%! That's just $2.03 a month. And you also get 4 extra months completely for free, but you must go to piavpn.com/nailingtheapex for a truly private digital life. Once more, it's piavpn.com/nailingtheapex.
Get in on the action and make your bet with Sports Interaction. Summer is heating up with baseball. Can the Jays make a run at the division?
Oh, no.
Yeah. Hey, but you can bet before the game, whichever way you think. Live and in play at all your favorite teams and hot dog contests. Woo! Woo! SportsInteraction.com/STPN or download the app to get started. It's 19 plus. And what do you have to do, Steve?
Please play responsibly.
Welcome to Nailing the Apex, everyone. I'm Tim Harini. Please head on over to Spotify. Give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts as well. Write reviews. It really helps us grow the show. You can also watch us on YouTube. You can follow me on social media. Joining me today, Adam Wild, for our part 3 of our 3-part series of grading the F1 teams and drivers. The way we do it, we give out A+, A minus, B plus, B minus, et cetera, all the way down to F. And we've already been through most of the grid. We have 3 teams left. We have Aston Martin, Mercedes, and Ferrari. We'll start, Adam, with Aston Martin, 3rd in the constructor standings. At one point, they were 2nd. Mm-hmm. And this team, for me, they've made a massive improvement. And I really think this is going to be a team that's going to be forced to be reckoned with in the next few years. I gave them a grade of B plus.
Ooh. Oh, you were harsh. I gave them an A. Why did you give them a B plus?
Okay, here's my understanding. Here, if the halfway mark had have ended and they were able to hang on to 2nd in the constructors, and they didn't go the wrong way in terms of their aero upgrades, this would have been an A plus.
Okay.
A plus. I think, for when we look at it, it's been an up and down season for the team. After the Hungarian Grand Prix, team principal Mike Crack saying, that it was a reality check. It was a reality check for the team. They've slipped back further, and that was supposed to be a track where the team was going to be strong. It's a tight and twisty track, but during the media availability on the Thursday leading into the Belgian Grand Prix, Mike did let us know that since the Canadian Grand Prix, they've gone in the wrong direction with the AMR 23 with its upgrades. So they brought a modified side pods, engine cover, and their first big floor upgrade to Montreal. And the floor is a huge part of these race cars for this new regulation. And it worked on the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, but it has since it's really let the team down. Now they have brought a bit of a modification to the floor for Spa. That's why we kind of see them get back a bit of performance. But, as they really started to suffer on other tracks such as Austria, Silverstone, Hungary, all of these races, gives the team the right set of data points so that they can go back and then tweak it for the next round of upgrades to correct, the mistakes that they have made. So, this team is going to have upgrades in Netherlands. Most likely they'll have some for Monza and a few others as well. They still have a decent size of budget left to help develop this car. But, the car dropping out of the performance window so drastically has also had an effect on their drivers as well, which we'll get into in a second. But that's why I grade them where I grade them, where they were up so high, and then the smallest little mistake has really brought them right back down.
It has. Here's where I'm going to disagree with you, okay?
Yeah.
I'm looking at the F1 22 Constructors Championship. That's what I was Googling while you were saying. And and I just wanted to check. And I'm looking at also the current standings. Currently, Aston Martin has 196 points. Last year, altogether, 55. I don't know how you can't give that an A. And it's listen, if we had told them that they ended the season with close to 200 points, like we tell Mike Crack at the beginning of the year, hey, Mike, you're going to end the season with 200 points. He's going to be happy with that. He's going to be thrilled with that. No one is predicting that. And I like, Tim, listen, I know I like you're striving for greatness here. You're like, no, I expected more. I want better. But I feel like them being ahead of Ferrari is a huge deal.
It's a huge deal.
Crazy. And
it is.
And so that's why I give them an A. We have not. When was the last time we saw an F1 jump like this? Really? McLaren's come on recently, but like half season from like back of the pack, they were tied with, but Alfa Romeo finished ahead of them.
I mean, if you were to go all the way back to the start of 2022, they were at the back.
They were terrible.
At the start. They were literally at the back.
Yeah.
And then you go through, you get to Spain, and then they have a big, change with their aero philosophy. And then that allows them eventually to move up to 7th in the constructors. And then you go from 7th into 2nd, but then you fall back down into 3rd. Like, I think like Monaco could have been a race they could have won this year. But, obviously Max being absolutely incredible in qualifying and wrestling pole position away from Fernando. But again, with the tire strategy, right, in Monaco, it kind of costed them a win. And yes, you can't really perceive where rain is going to come and when it's going to hit and how bad it's going to be, et cetera. I get that. I just look at all of these tiny little details where it's like, I want this team to be the best. And, it's just these little tiny things for me that really bring it down. It's like, me grading Ferrari. I love Ferrari, but it hasn't been good for them. For Aston Martin, it's been at points great.
Yeah.
But then it's kind of been good. And it's that good part that's been a little bit disappointing.
So let's talk about the drivers then. Where are you at with Fernando Alonso?
I mean, Fernando's been awesome, right? Like I give Fernando a grade of A.
Me too.
He's been absolutely incredible. He's, executed when he's had the car underneath him. His qualifying in Monaco was masterful. He looks the best he's ever been. And I respect that because he's leaving a team that, in his words, didn't make him feel like he wanted to be there. Like they wanted him, where Aston Martin, they wanted him. Like they wanted Fernando Alonso, and he still has the passion, and he's still incredibly fit given his age, the amount of travel that they have to do, the amount of work that he's had to put in to change his diet around and make sure that his fitness is in peak condition. Like he's the fittest he's ever looked at him coming into this season.
Well, didn't he lose like another 10 pounds or something?
Oh, yeah.
Crazy. How do you do that on those tiny little F1 frames? Like, it's not like these are not big men, right? These are tiny guys. So
well, some of them are really tall, right?
They're
tall. Like
Yeah.
Lance is really tall. Esteban Ocon's really tall. I mean,
Albon's tall.
Yeah, Albon's tall. Like so they're tall guys. It's just that they're physically strong. Like they're strong dudes, right? Like they may not look it, but trust me, they are. But
And I also like Alonso's year for the fact that for like a good solid month, people were actually asking if he was dating Taylor Swift. I think that was the funniest. Like it just shows you where the sport's at, right?
yeah,
Like
true.
Here's a 42-year-old F1 driver, and Taylor Swift is touring in North America. He's only there for like the Canadian race, and they're like, oh yeah, this is definitely something that's happening. I loved it. I'm in for that.
I mean, I have to I respect whoever does his socials and
they
who
lean
sort
into
of
that.
runs that side of his life because, I mean, they do such a great job of allowing him to stir stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you guys sent me the article, I think it was whenever it was trending on social media, and then you guys notified me of it. I'm like, what is this? Like, what am I looking at here? I ended up having to go and like cross-reference when Taylor Swift's concerts were and match them up for where Fernando Alonso was racing, and literally had to come to the conclusion that it was physically not possible for Taylor Swift or Fernando Alonso to be in two places at once.
But I'm glad we checked it out. I'm glad we knew. Now we know.
Oh my God.
What about
That's
Lance? Because
incredible.
Lance has had a really interesting year,
Yeah.
especially starting with the double wrist break that I think people really forget about.
Oh yeah. For Lance, I gave him a grade of B. I mean, so if we're talking about the start of the season with the broken bones and the missing of testing, I think when I spoke with Mike Crack, about Lance missing testing, and he explained it to me, like this. So it's with testing, it's kind of like you're adding tools to your tool belt. You're understanding the car, you're understanding as a driver what it needs. You're also being able to understand what the limits of the car is. Now, if you're not able to do all of that, you get into these race weekends and you can't really have that understanding, because if you mess up a session, you essentially really ruin the rest of your weekend. If you crash the car, you've kind of really ruined your weekend because you're not getting data points. You've ruined tires as well that you may need later on in the weekend. So there's so much that goes into these practice sessions and everything. So you can't really experiment with all of that. So if you haven't got the tools and the knowledge of the car, that's going to affect you as a driver for at least 5 to 6 races. You got to get comfortable in the car. And then he's had a good qualifying for some events. He's had some strong races. He had one in Spain that really, really stood out to me. Then the car had that change in Canada with the new floor, and it's kind of like everything's gotten thrown out the window, and the things that he did know, now he's maybe got to change some things and relearn some things. And that's what I kind of look at the moment. Now, whether or not that's what the case is, I'm not too sure. It's also, on top of that, really difficult to go up against, one of the best racing drivers who's ever driven an F1 car, Adam.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna give Lance a B-, and I give him that because I think, first off, we don't. It's funny. Austin Matthews had 40 goals last year, and if any other Leaf did that, people would be like, "That's amazing," right? But Austin Matthews did it, and Leaf fans are like, "Well, he had an okay year because he scored 60 the previous," but because he had wrist problems the whole year. It takes a long time to heal that sort of stuff, and it's not like Lance is being good to his wrists. He's putting it under enormous G-forces and pressure and everything else. I think the fact that he is where he is and that he got that car to perform that first week, 2 weeks after breaking his wrist, was amazing. He needs to close the delta between him and Alonso. It's the biggest on the grid right now. That's the time delta between the two of them is too much. And so if he can knock 2 or 3 seconds off of it, and he can, we know he can. And Aston Martin kind of gets it together, and you start to see them finishing. Maybe they're starting to finish 5 and 6, or maybe one of them's 3 and the other one's 5. That's where I think they need to be, ought to be, or aiming to be for the rest of the year. So I think that grade for Lance is going to go up. I just feel like he needs, and the team needs, a little bit of time to get whatever's wrong under control there.
Get whatever's wrong under control sounds like
it's regressing. It is.
It sounds like our intro to Mercedes here.
Yeah, yeah. What do you give them? What do you give them?
Great. I gave Mercedes a grade of B.
Okay.
So even I was like B-, only because they stuck with this philosophy for as long as they did with this zero side pod concept. And if you go back to last year, the biggest part for them was trying to understand the bouncing, and if they got the bouncing under control, which to their credit, they really did look like they got that under control with that car. Their simulations were saying that this car was going to be very competitive, but to stick with it, even just into the first 4 or 5 races of this season, for me, that's a little disappointing, because they started off in Bahrain, extremely off the pace.
Yep.
When I saw the car preseason during their launch, I liked the color. I loved that the black was back and all of that, but I was still confused as to why they were still running this same concept that they hadn't really changed. They didn't change the suspension geometry really to correct for anti-dive, anti-squat, all that stuff. And so preseason testing, like I said, didn't go well. But again, I mean, for this team to make that big switch in Monaco and then to have that car start to perform, that's what's kind of bumped them up for me. Like, I think if they're still running this same concept right now, this grade is a lot lower.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're right. And I'm going to give them a B+. I think by Mercedes standards, they've been well below par for, the better part of 2 years. And I'm surprised they stuck with it too, Tim. It was clearly not working last year, and it did not work to start this year. But what I will give them credit for is the ability to shift on the fly, although it's too late. They should have done this in December, January. And it's going to cost them another season and another real chance at getting up close with Red Bull.
Yeah.
But I do think they've got a fantastic technical team to be able to do that. A down season for them is second place. That's where they finished last year. That's a down season. They're second place again this year. I don't know. Listen, there are very few sports teams that you can cheer for where not winning is anathema. Like, you have to be literally like a New England Patriots fan or something like that. You just get used to winning, and I think Mercedes fans did. I also think their driver lineup, but I know we're going to get to that. I think it's overall probably the strongest on the grid.
If another thing about Mercedes, switching in the background, switching Mike Elliott and James Allison around in that technical department, that's a huge change for them as well. Even though James Allison's coming back to a former position, again, to have to admit that hey, like, even our interior management needs to be reversed. I mean, for them to come out and admit that is pretty good. I think one of the team's disadvantages, though, moving forward, is the testing time in the wind tunnel. So if you go back to the Austrian Grand Prix, I think it was, with F1's ATR, which is the aerodynamic testing. So that's wind tunnel and CFD time. How much time do you get? So that gets reset every 6 months. So the period from January 2023 to June 2023, that's dictated by the previous season's standings, so 2022 standings. So Mercedes, their ATR is set at 75%. So the second most time, because they were the second in the constructors by the time it switched over, which was July. And so from this July to this December coming up, that 6 month period for Mercedes, they will only get 75% of that ATR. So that's around 240 wind tunnel runs for the ATR period. So that's 6 month span. And it averages to about 30 runs per week, if my math is right on all that. So F1 aerodynamic testing time to July to December 2023, Mercedes 75%, because they are in second in the constructors. Now, moving forward, will they be able to catch Red Bull with that?
Don't think so.
Gonna be tough.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think Red Bull knows that too. Well, so with their drivers, who do you want to start with, Lewis or George?
Yeah, I'll start with Lewis. He's fourth in the standings. He's got 148 points. I gave Lewis a grade of A-. It's a tough start to the season for Hamilton. He really looked to struggle with that zero side pod, the first sort of iteration of this car concept that they brought to Bahrain. Then the new upgrades that they brought to Monaco, that really, I think, changed things around for him, and he got stronger. They changed a bit of the suspension geometry to help with the braking. I think that also played into his hands as well, because he's phenomenal on the brakes. 4 podiums, pole position in Hungary. Yeah, I thought, and then, obviously he's Lewis Hamilton. So it's, it's the way it is. He's not leaving the A department for me. Guy's going to be incredible in anything. So
I'm going to be giving you an A- as well. I think the biggest compliment you can get is from the guy that hates you the most, and that's Helmut Marko. And I'll tell you, Helmut Marko can't stand Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton on a racing level. I don't know what their personal relationship is. I'm sure it's fine. But when Helmut Marko gives you a compliment, especially if you're a driver for another team, you're something special. And the fact that Lewis is this age, Marco's a couple of times in the papers. I just love following that guy because he just says a whole bunch. He just lights fires and then walks away. Just hear it. Pull the pin on this grenade. Boom. All right. Interview over. We'll let the F1 press take that for the next week. I think Lewis Hamilton I think he's such a spectacular driver. I think he's a great person too. Such a great ambassador for the sport. And if you're a young kid, if my kid looked up to Lewis Hamilton, I'd be like, okay, I'm doing an okay job as a parent. And I think if Helmut Marko, who hates you, is saying he's a pretty fantastic driver, then I think that's all you really need to know. Mm-hmm. The results haven't been there. They've been there a little bit more recently. And listen, if any team is going to win a race this year other than Red Bull, it's going to be Mercedes. They've been close a couple times. But Lewis has been steady and much more consistent than I think he was last year, where he had a really tough start. The car wasn't great, but George was outperforming.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I agree for sure. As for George, he's sixth in the standings, 99 points. Again, I gave him the same grade as Lewis. I gave him an A- because, looks to be struggling with the car currently, but at the beginning of the season, he actually looked stronger than Lewis was. And I think when they made this change to the car, I think that affected what George does. And so only one podium for him so far this season as well, which came in Spain. And so if I were to mark this 3 or 4 races into the season, I think George is getting that AA+, but since the past, last 4 races, I think that's kind of brought him down to A- for me. Okay.
Well, I gave him a B+, and I just think the one thing I want to see from George Russell is dominance in his category. And that means beating Lewis a little bit more regularly. That means making sure that Ferrari's not really ever they're going to be in your rearview mirror the whole time. And obviously, Ferrari's a tough one, but I want to see George dominate. I know he's got it. I know he's got that skill, but you're just waiting for that next step with him, right? It's just, it's there. And he is, if he takes that next step, that is his team when Lewis goes. And so I feel like he knows it. I think the team knows it. Toto knows it. And so I think it's going to happen. I just want to see a little bit more. It's sort of like with Charles. You just want to see that extra kick. And the interesting thing about Mercedes too is you have not heard much from Ralf Schumacher this year. Not talking to the papers so much, are we, Mr. Schumacher? Last year with Haas, he was just yakety yak with those German papers, and now it's like nothing. And it's, I think, because, shut up, you're with Mercedes now, be quiet. Is that funny? Just kind of disappeared.
Let's head over to Red Bull, talk about them, because, obviously, Adam, you can't give them anything outside of a grade A+.
A+. They've been amazing.
They've been incredible. Plus with the least amount of ATR, so that aerodynamic testing time, 63%. So they really nailed their execution in the off season. And I think the only really big upgrades they actually really brought to this car was Hungary. They brought a lot of upgrades. Most, likely that'll be the biggest that they bring for the rest of the season. I think they made about 5 changes to a few things: cooling inlet, brake ducts, bodywork, floor edges as well. And so that was kind of that big sort of upgrade that they decided to bring in. But I marvel at what this team was able to accomplish with, I don't want to say so little. Because they have a ton of resources and they have some of the best people around in the background working on this thing. But, to be given 63% of this aerodynamic testing time and to just blow all of these teams out of the water is still really impressive.
Spectacular. It's amazing. Adrian Newey, whatever they're paying him, they should be paying him more. Yeah. I don't think there's a cap on what you could pay a guy like that. He's just an absolute genius. And what, Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen might be to driving, Adrian Newey is to, engineering. He's just unbelievable. I know his book is on that shelf behind you. I haven't read it yet, but I've heard it's a spectacular book.
So good.
Is it good? Okay, I've got it on audiobook, so I'll have to check. I'll have to read it.
So good.
I think I'll give Red Bull credit this year. The drama like the thing that turned a lot of us off last year was the drama around them, because there was the fallout of, the Michael Massey call in 2021. There was drama between Max and Sergio, which, listen, that could always flare back up again, but I don't think so this year. But at the end of the day, what they've been is business. They go into a race, we go to win. And obviously we'll break down Max and Sergio separately. But you're seeing what a team that has matured and drivers that have matured can do with a really, really great car and a all-world generational talent driver.
I think what could hurt the team moving forward is, again, that ATR, so the wind tunnel CFD time.
Can anyone catch them really, though?
I think for next season, yeah. I think so. I mean, so since they were leading the way in the constructors at the turnover point in June, heading into the Austrian Grand Prix, so they're only going to be given 70% of the total aerodynamic testing allowance, but they still have that 10% reduction in their testing time. So I think it's only around 63% is what they're going to have. And that's due to breaching the 2021 budget cap regulations. So that penalty still holds up for them, but the penalty holds up until October. So that is when their 12-month penalty will end, and they will then be moved up to 70%. And 70% works out to be about 224 wind tunnel runs per ATR period, and then that averages out about 28 runs a week. I still think they can be caught only because they've already unlocked such a huge amount of performance, and considering the amount of performance that they've unlocked, even just in a straight line speed, plus with the DRS, the beam wing effect that they've got there, whatever's going on at the back with how they stall the air there, like that's what a lot of these teams are going to be working on, try to figure out how to emulate that. Yeah. And then I think I don't see them making like another huge step forward. Right. And you know what, though? It might be enough. I mean, they were 20 something seconds ahead. When we talk about Max, I think we can save him for last. I want to know what you think about Sergio, because to me, man. So this is where it gets interesting, right? Because Max, I know what you're going to give Max, because I'm going to give him the same thing. Yeah. Tell me about Sergio. B. That's kinder than I was. I was B-. Well, I mean, we're not too far off, but the thing is that, like, I think ever since the Miami Grand Prix, it started on pole. He was eventually beaten by Verstappen on an alternate tire strategy where essentially Sergio just lost the race. The crash in Monaco in Q1 qualifying, and then it's just kind of like this downward spiral from there that has really affected his confidence. And he's up against the best in the world in Max Verstappen. And the thing about Max is that he eats, sleeps, and breathes racing at him. Like if he's not in an F1 car, he's on his own simulator. Verstappen told me he had a simulator installed in his friggin' motorhome for the European races this year. So when he wasn't in the car, he was playing racing games on his sim. Yeah. And he's launching weekend. And I think he's launching a GT3 team as well. Like he's the maniac. But that's the thing, though. That's the level that is required, I think, to contend with the Verstappen and this younger generation now, where it's like racing needs to be your life 24/7. And I think for Sergio, I don't necessarily know what his mindset is, but I think in this summer break, he's probably going to be working hard on trying to figure out, like, where can he get back time to Max, because I don't think you can go into every season thinking you're like, this was like the sort of the Nico Rosberg-y. This could have been it. Yeah. This could have been it for him, I think. Like, he was there, Adam. Like, he could have won. Yeah. Yep.
I think it was, again, Helmut Marko to quote because he's so quotable, but he was talking about, he's like, now that he's woken up from his championship dream, he can just get back to racing, right?
That's what it was.
That's a pretty sizzling quote. But, you know, with Sergio, what I don't understand, Tim, and this is just as a fan, right? You're a racer, you know. I don't understand why his qualifying isn't so good. I don't understand why he's not making it out of Q1. Why does that happen? How is that possible?
Honestly, I think it's just that confidence thing, right? You put that pressure on yourself. And here's the thing, like, so from my time racing, giving you an example, I was always at my best when I was under a lot of pressure. But when I put other people under pressure, certain competitors crumbled. And I'm not saying that maybe Sergio can't handle pressure, but I think internally, if you put pressure on yourself, sometimes you're key to making those mistakes. And I think when you get into a qualifying session in Formula One, where you're only getting like one shot at a quali lap, you know, there is a certain amount of pressure that one has to put on themselves. They just, you just do. That's just the way it is. I don't know if it's that, or if it's Sergio just maybe trying too hard or pushing too hard.
Well, we'll see. I was very curious to get into that. Now, Max Verstappen, I think we know what the rating is.
Dude.
What's the rating, Tim?
A+, man.
A+. Is this the greatest? This already is probably the greatest F1 season of all time.
He's been brilliant. I think if we look at, I think for this, we have to look at Max as a whole over, you know, a good 5-6 years, right? Like, he's learned how to mature, right? He's learned how to become calculated. He still has that aggression, but it's focused now. He executes when needed, and he pushes to 100% when it's required. Where in the past, I think for Max, he was taking things a little too far, going a little bit too much over the limit on too many different occasions when he probably didn't need to. And yes, he still wants to win everything and set the fastest lap and be aggressive and all those good things and get pole position, but he doesn't. I look at Max now, and I said this last year, he doesn't force the issue when he knows it's not there. Where in the past, I think we can't.
Yeah. He was that guy. He was, well, I mean, wasn't there a crash in like 2018 with him and Ricardo? And they ran right into each other in Baku. Right. And that's the kind of shit that, Christian Horner grabbed them both and said, what the hell? But I felt at the time that was a little bit more on Max and his aggressiveness just because of the way he is. But you're right. You have to push the edge to know what the edge is. And I think he knows what the edge is. And I think what impresses me the most is oftentimes guys, when they're winning like this, you can get lazy, you can enjoy it a little too much, and you can make one mistake. One mistake in a car like that, you're off the road. And you're seeing the difference between a great driver and a very good driver. Sergio Perez, there's no question that Sergio Perez is a very good driver. There's a reason he's there. I have questions about whether he'll stay there, because if his rating is a B or a B-, that's not what Red Bull hires. Red Bull hires A drivers only. But I would say that Sergio is an everyman great driver. Max Verstappen is walking on water, and that's the thing. And it's funny. My wife said to me, and I know a lot of people said this, she's like, it's a little boring. Like, she loves F1 as well, but she's like, it's the same car winning every race and same guys. And I said, you gotta reframe the way you look at this. You're watching greatness every time you turn on, or every time we open that F1 app. We are watching greatness. We're watching one of the best of all time. And we all liked F1 when Mercedes was winning all the time, so it's no big deal. Listen, Red Bull is the most hateable good team on the grid.
That's a good point.
They're the most hateable. You just go, you guys drive me absolutely bonkers. But this is greatness, and we need to appreciate greatness. 100%. And sometimes your greatest rival is having a heater, and they're doing amazing.
Yeah, you have to respect them, right, Adam?
Yeah.
It's you say it so well. You say it so well there. I mean, when I look at Sergio and I think about next year, I think about, is Sergio going to have this dip in performance, for, 6, I would say 6 races at least, where he's had this sort of dip in performance. And would that, and I have to question, would that cost Red Bull a championship for next season? And you have to say yes, only because these teams are going to take a step. These teams are going to claw back the performance. You've already seen what McLaren has done. So catching Red Bull is extremely possible because of what McLaren did with a wind tunnel out in the middle of Cologne, not even like on the property. So that just shows us that it is possible and it probably is going to happen. And dominance only lasts so long.
Yeah.
Right? And so at the end of the day, it's like, is Sergio Perez going to be your guy? It's going to help you win a Constructors' Championship next season.
I'm wondering about that. If he continues, Tim, in your honest opinion, if he continues at the pace he's been the last 4 or 5 races, is Sergio Perez driving for Red Bull next year?
I mean, obviously he's got that contract. I mean, Christian Horner's made that known. He does. So I think we're really going to have to see Sergio struggle mightily, I think, over the next 6-7 races for them to consider moving him. I think if Sergio is able to maintain the type of performance that he had in Spa, then I think he's probably safe.
Okay. All right.
So I think.
Well, man, we'll see what happens. I do hope, listen, I don't want to get in the way of greatness, but it would be good to see one driver win something other than Red Bull. But if it doesn't happen, that's fine too. We'll be fine with it.
Adam, dude, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. I always love doing these kind of pods with you, dude.
Me too, buddy. Like I love talking, man. It's like, I get to hang around and talk F1 for an hour. That's great. So thanks for having me on, Tim. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for watching and listening. Please head over to Spotify, give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts as well. Helps us grow the pod. And you can also watch us on YouTube, like I was saying. You can follow me on social media at Tim Harani. And we will be back later on in the following week with a very special guest. I'm not going to tell you where he's from, but he's going to talk to us about engines.
Ooh.
That's right.
Love
Talk
it.
to you all later, everybody.